The meeting's now live.
Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of the Cabinet. I'm Gerald Jackson, leader of the City Council, and welcome to this virtual meeting. Members of the public invited to view this meeting. There's been an opportunity for written representations to be submitted. We're meeting virtually in response to limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purposes of this meeting, the City Solicitor has advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authorities Meetings Regulation 2020 number 392. Members, please keep your cameras on throughout the meeting and only turn your microphones off when you speak. Officers, please keep cameras off until you're speaking, and likewise keep mics off unless you're speaking. I'll now ask members of the Cabinet to introduce themselves. So going around on my screen, Councillor Matthew Winnington.
Hi, Matthew Winnington, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Pitt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Steve Pitt, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development.
Councillor Darren Sanders.
Hello, I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Councillor Susie Horton.
Good afternoon, Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
And as I understand, Councillor Horton, proud recipient of an award for being an outstanding woman. Is this true?
An outstanding elder, which I'm interpreting as life experienced.
Excellent. Now, another outstanding elder, although I might be told off for saying this, Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Thought that might come about, yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. Very elderly.
Okay. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Lee Hunt here. I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, and I am an elected ward councillor for Nelson Ward. And I mention this because Nelson doesn't adequately describe where it is, but the area covers Tipner, Stamshaw, Buckland and North End, and I'd like to make everybody well aware of that. Thank you all.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Councillor Hugh Mason, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and the Member for St Jude Ward, which is in the south of the city.
Okay, Councillor Dave Ashmore.
Good afternoon, Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Great, welcome. Okay, folks, can we now go round and introduce the officers who are here with us, and we'll see where we go. So I've got Hayley to start with.
Hi all, I'm Hayley Trower. I'm the Air Quality Improvement Manager.
Okay, Nick. So next I've got Rachel Cutler.
Hello, thank you. Yes, Rachel Cutler, Head of Planning Policy.
Okay, Jane Lemaire.
Hello, I'm Jane Lemaire, Business Manager for Employment, Learning and Skills in Economic Growth.
Okay, Natasha Edmonds.
Good afternoon, Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
James Hill.
Good afternoon, James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Anna Martin. Anna, are you here?
I'm sorry, I'm just unmuting. Yes, Anna Martin, Local Democracy Officer.
Okay, Ian Maguire.
Good afternoon, Ian Maguire, Assistant Director of Planning and Economic Growth. I'll be presenting the SIL item today.
And you're very quiet, Ian. James, have we seen you yet? Mr. Hill, come in.
Yes, Leader, introduced.
My apologies, sorry. Chris Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Okay, Richard Locke.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard Locke. I'm the Council's Acting Procurement Manager.
Okay, Sophie Mallon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sophie Mallon and I'm acting as City Solicitor.
Thank you. Alex Roke.
Good afternoon, Alex Roke, one of the Technical Transport Planners in the Air Quality team.
Thank you. Mark Sage.
Hi everyone, Mark Sage, the City Council's Tackling Poverty Coordinator.
Okay, is there anybody I have missed out? Speak now or for... I've got Joe Bennett. Yeah, Joe, beg your pardon.
No problem. Joe Bennett, Head of Business Relationships, Growth and Support from Housing, Neighbourhoods and Buildings, talking about the Cabbage Field item today.
And Joe, what does that title mean? Can you go through it again?
No.
All right, it's a very long and strange title.
I would never want to let down the Cabinet, but no, unfortunately not.
All right, well, we'll have to think about that again. Andy, I hope you have a more sensible title.
Yep, Andy Bullock, Project Manager in the Air Quality team, concentrating on behaviour change and Clean Air Fund.
Wonderful. Okay, look, we were going to... I think that's it. Is anybody else not being able to introduce themselves? No, okay. So, as I understand it, what I think we were going to do is to try and do things from the reverse order as published, but we haven't seen either Mike Stoneman or Alison Jeffrey. I have texted both of them. Oh, Mr. Biddle, Chris Ward says Andy Biddle hasn't said hello and introduced himself. Mr. Biddle, are you here? No, is the answer to that. Okay, so we were going to start with the 2 education items, and that can't happen. And Lee Hunt, the community safety plan, we're awaiting Lisa Wills as well. Is that correct?
I spoke to them just before this meeting. Anna should be calling her from the lobby. She's on standby to introduce her community safety plan report.
Anna, who do you have waiting to come in, and can you please let everybody and anybody in?
Yeah, because Lisa thought she'd be last and now she'll be first, so I've emailed her to ask her to join, and I'll ask her again.
Okay, so in which case, I'm going to get slightly worried about this, but let's do item 12 is the social value policy. Steve, is this you and colleagues from procurement?
Yes, it is. I believe that Jane Lemaire and Richard Locke and Natasha will be presenting probably between them. Natasha, are you leading?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, lead on, Natasha.
Thank you. So we are here today to seek approval for the social value policy for the council to formalise our position around social value. This recognises existing good practice in delivering social value to the city, but also formalises the position and how we take further steps to deliver social value, particularly as we focus on recovering from the pandemic. The policy aligns to both our corporate priorities, but also the city vision that the Cabinet recently were presented with, developed by the city, its residents and partners. It is very aspirational, and in as much as it is a very holistic approach, so it doesn't just focus on procurement, it focuses on how we deliver social value across a range of different areas, including our climate agenda as well as our people agenda in terms of health, well-being, and not just in procurement terms. So the work recognises everything that we're already doing and then focuses holistically on what more we can do going forward. There are a number of levers that we will be deploying as part of this policy. So I already mentioned procurement, contract management and commissioning, but there are also opportunities in regeneration and planning, education and skills, employment and volunteering as we go forward. We also are able to lever some of the excellent partnerships that we have across the city, but also in terms of how we promote the work that we do around social value through improved communication and cultural change within the organisation, so that we can develop more of a mindset around how we deliver social value going forward. The appendices also set out some of the activities that we'll be focusing on in the first year of implementing the policy, particularly on some of the quick wins. That will focus in the first instance on procurement and commissioning and contract management, but also on developing more of a comms and marketing strategy around the existing good practice that we currently have in place, and developing our social value work with the partners that we currently work with. And finally, developing a framework for how we can actually measure the social value that we currently deliver and what we will be delivering going forward. So that's a brief summary of the policy. And over to you. Thank you.
Okay, Richard, anything you'd like to add to it?
Natasha's given a very, very good overview.
Okay.
There, I think in terms of, I think there's nothing further really from me, I'm afraid.
No, okay, that's great. Mr. Pitt.
Yeah. Thank you very much for bringing this forward to us today. It's a piece of work that the number of members of the Cabinet have been working on, actually. Councillor Atwell, Councillor Horton and I have all been involved in the development of this process. I think there's some key points to draw out. One is the speed at which you've actually developed this. There's been a lot of work that's gone in over quite a condensed period of time, but it was very much an emerging piece of work that we've seen as being a response to the pandemic situation and some of the relationships between partners across the city that have really come to the fore over the last year, and the benefits that we've seen in that greater partnership working, but also understanding how important it is to strengthen the value of the Portsmouth pound and keep that money locally wherever we possibly can, and to ensure that our contracts are not just ticking all the boxes for their primary purpose, but also delivering added value to our communities and to us as a council as well. But also, it's not the start of a journey. That would be unfair, because actually there's a lot of things we already do, as Natasha said, as a council to deliver social value. But it is marking the current position of where we are on that journey and saying, okay, looking back, we've got things that we've learnt and some good practices that we've already got in place, but there is a lot further to go. And there is a lot more to do around developing those relationships moving forward. Because although this document very much looks at things from a PCC perspective, we're all determined going forward that we understand not just our own perspective, but how we interrelate to other organisations in the city. For example, shaping Portsmouth and the Hive. But also, the NHS Hospitals Trust, the Royal Navy, the university, all the key actors across the city, and in particular, focus for me, the voluntary and community sector. So it's given us a benchmark of where we are, it's told us where we've come from, and it gives us the roadmap for a journey of where we're going, so that we can build back not just better, but greener and more sustainably moving forward in the best interest of our communities. So a huge thanks from me to Jane Lemaire and to Richard Locke and to Natasha for their collective work on this, and to the consultants who came in and gave us some assistance to do a short but heavily focused piece of work that's brought forward what I believe is going to be known as the Portsmouth model in years to come. So thank you all very much.
Okay, Councillor Susie Horton.
So I just want to add one other thing. I mean, Steve's covered most of what I would have said, but I just wanted to say that when we do pieces of work like the City Vision and we look at aspirational projects, it's really important that those are embedded in a pragmatic model as well. And for me, this brings those two together, which is really important, because you're never going to, nor would you want to, manage every single partner, but it's handy when you're on the same page in terms of values. So I think this does that really well.
Okay, and I think this is very welcome. I think we've got to make sure that we're looking at not just the absolute cheapest of things, but looking at what the value is to society and the city. So I look at this as well with our work on getting accreditation for being a real living wage payer, not just to our own staff, which is what we've done, but also to the staff working for contractors. And I think that's very positive, and I think building those things together show the change that we're wanting to see in the way in which the council operates as an organisation that puts out contracts. We don't just want to look at the cheapest possible. We want to look at quality and building sustainability within our city. So my thanks to everybody involved with this. Colleagues, are you happy for this to go forward? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, that's done. Lisa, do I see you loitering now?
You do, leader, yes.
Okay, let's come to you then. Item 13, Community Safety Plan.
Okay, so the recommendations in the report are for the council or cabinet to endorse this plan and forward it on to full council for the formal endorsement of the whole council. As you know, community safety plans are always based on detailed analysis over the years, and over the years we've understood the connection between the priorities, the underlying priorities that drive crime and antisocial behaviour. And we've also understood that those priorities are very similar to the priorities that drive improved educational attainment and other things that we want to be able to do. So this strategic plan, and I think the introduction explains that actually this is a different approach this year. So what we've done is, rather than do an individual community safety plan, the Safer Portsmouth Partnership Plan, we've pulled together existing strategies in order to be able to pull together the work that is being done to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour and improve health and well-being at the same time. So the report explains how that's done. This is a long-term strategic plan. It's not an operational plan. So other parts of the council, licensing, environmental health, the work of the community wardens continue to work alongside the police and partners day to day to deal with our operational issues. But the longer-term plans will be pulled together under the health and well-being strategy, which will be developed later in the year. And this plan is part of that work. I don't know if you want me to go into any more detail or if you're trying to go through things quickly.
Well, Lisa, I don't want to rush through things, but my understanding is that this is going on to full council.
It is.
To be accepted by full council. But Councillor Lee Hunt, would you like to come in?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to thank Lisa for bringing this report to us. It's working very hard indeed. And what I think is really important for members the cabinet to understand today, this is bringing three strategies together, which is, and if I get this wrong, Lisa, you intervene very quickly.
I will.
Yeah, thank you. The serious violent crime strategy, the domestic violence strategy, and the early intervention strategies that we have. And this is very important because for us in this council, this group at least, early intervention is very important because it helps us to drive down the scourge of domestic violence and violent crime and drive down all crime, which is where we want to get to. And very similar to Susie, I'd just like to echo her words that we can't manage the police, we can't manage all of our other partners that we commission, but as Susie has just said, I'd like to echo her words. This strategy, this report helps us all to be on the same page. And that's a really good thing for us all want to do. So if we're all pulling in the same direction, then we'll all be servicing our statutory obligation to prevent crime, to drive down crime and the causes of crime, and thereby make a healthier, wealthier and better city.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Lee. Colleagues, are you happy to send this on to full council for their approval? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. I think Alison and Mike are still not with us, so we will now move on to item 11. But before that, I'm sorry, I'm told we need to. Colleagues, has anybody got any declarations of interest on any of the items today? I didn't think there were any. No, none. Sophie wants us to agree the minutes, but I was going to do that at the end on the basis we were going to work backwards. Sophie, are we allowed to do that at the end?
Yeah, it's no problem.
I've just had a message from Jenny Edwards to say that neither Mike nor Alison were expecting to come to Cabinet today. Susie, are you happy to introduce those two education reports?
Yeah.
But their meetings that they are in will finish at 1. Would you prefer to wait for them, Susie, or are you happy to introduce them?
I'm happy with either of those. I think I can introduce the report or wait for them. It might be an idea to wait if they want to come.
Okay. Okay, thanks. All right, let's then do item item 11, Clean Air Fund eligibility criteria. And I think, Andy, you're presenting this, is that correct?
Yep, that's right, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, leap in, Andy.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is regarding the Clean Air Fund that is set to go live very shortly, which is in support of the Clean Air Zone, or to support those who would be most affected by the Clean Air Zone, which is set to go live in the city later on in the year in November. So we're putting this report forward today to seek approval for the recommended eligibility criteria and how we're looking to prioritise who receives the funding so that we can ensure that those most affected will be put first. And that's in 3 different vehicle groups. So that's those who run or operate private hire vehicles and taxis or hackney carriages, buses and coaches, and heavy goods vehicles. So it's those individuals and businesses that are affected by those. So the report sets out the criteria and the list of priorities that we've put together. It has come about through a series of ministerial directives that have been given out to us over the last couple of years by the government. The last being a year ago, March 2020, which asked us to implement a Class B clean air zone, which would charge those vehicle groups that we've already mentioned to enter a certain part of the city. And we were due to launch that as soon as possible in order to bring the nitrogen dioxide levels down to within legal limits by the shortest possible time and by 2022. So as you can appreciate, we're kind of running against the clock from the start here. We have secured some funding from the Joint Air Quality Unit as part of the government through this process. The funding that we've so far secured for these different vehicle groups won't be able to support absolutely every individual and business affected. And the funding through the full business case that we've done is also, we've made a request for an increased amount of funding. Because we know through our consultation, our traffic modelling, and through our engagement through this process that, as I said, there isn't enough funding available at the moment. So what we've requested is in the region of 1.2 million for private hire vehicle and hackney carriages, nearly $1 million for buses and coaches, and 800,000 for HGVs. And they're grants for a specific number of vehicles. There is an increased emphasis on our full business case on wheelchair accessible vehicles in particular. That is because we certainly recognise that the amounts that JACU have offered us fall way short of what would be needed to really upgrade your vehicle, and we've put forward a different amount that we would hope would cover the whole fleet of non-compliant vehicles, and for the majority of the cost of upgrading those vehicles. So as I say, this is due to launch soon. In fact, March 19th, next Friday, is our preferred date to launch the funding. The eligibility criteria and the prioritisation does take into account the impacts of COVID over the last year on how possible it's been to operate businesses in the city and in and around the city. Other clean air zone cities have been in advance of our dates, so that's where we kind of contrast with them in some areas. And we have also done everything we can to make this as accessible as possible and raise as much awareness as possible. So that includes a dedicated website, includes a pre-registration process, lots of stakeholder engagement, and other actions as well. So the report sets out the main points of the eligibility criteria. We've tried to make it kind of as least restrictive as possible without making it a free-for-all at the same time. So it is less restrictive than other local authorities, but the main points are obviously that it's the vehicles that would be using the clean air zone, that they're non-compliant, that they're the local businesses and individuals first, that they can show when it's taxis and private hire vehicles, for example, that they can show that they certainly intended to be operating over the last year, and we can do that through making sure that they were licensed for last year, albeit they don't necessarily have to have been active in the last year with active licensing. That they will make full use of this funding, so that means obviously that they will try whatever they can to commit to continuing to be active over the next few years, that they won't sell the vehicle that they're upgrading to, and that we can enforce and prevent fraudulent activity as well, and the associated legal measures will be put in place for that. The HGV and coach and bus funding eligibility criteria will be identical actually for those vehicles, identical between them. We're not proposing prioritisation factors, and when I say prioritisation factors, it's a list of criteria that would help us assess different applications against each other to determine who would be the most affected. We're not proposing prioritisation factors at the moment for taxis and private hire vehicles, because the amount of non-compliant vehicles in the city that are licensed at the moment, there is enough grants for all of them at this time. And we understand through close liaison with the stakeholders, including the licensing team, that it's unlikely that those who have suspended their licenses over the last year would return with those non-compliant vehicles. So we're quite confident about that. But we have put in place some prioritisation factors for coaches and buses and HGVs that recognises that that there's less kind of control over them, whereby with taxis and private hire vehicles there's the licensing in place for us to be able to control it, and a better understanding perhaps of who is going to come forward. So the report is there with the list of eligibility criteria, prioritisation factors, and it's just to also make a note that we're asking that there isn't funding available for people who've already gone ahead to upgrade their vehicles, and that we are noting that there are some exemptions to those vehicle groups, for example, emergency vehicles. So we're just noting that we wouldn't support them with funding because they're already going to be exempt from the CAS. Finally, we're asking that there's an element of delegated authority on this, where we may need to adjust the criteria or the list of priorities over time, depending on what comes forwards. And we're aiming to do this in rounds. So we'll have a first round of about 4 weeks, where it gives us time to kind of assess the applications coming in, compare them against each other, and ensure that our standards and our levels are in the right place. So it's just asking for continued delegated authority over that, and that is that in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor David Ashmore.
Hello. Thanks for that. Thanks, Andy, and thanks to all the officers actually who have been continuing to put together reports and documents and carrying out the extensive work that's been involved in, the clean air zone and securing the funding, to the affected groups there. And as people know, the government's clean air zone isn't our preferred way of dealing with the very real issue of air quality in the city. We'd have much preferred the funding to have had, to upgrade the walking, cycling and public transport infrastructure and address the fares that not everybody can afford to go on them. But be that as it may, we have to deal with what's been imposed upon us. Thanks for the report there. Thanks for the introductions of it and the explanations of how it's going to go. It's very detailed there to say how the various groups that are going to be affected by the clean air zone can get supported on that, while at the same time, increasing that drive to get more compliant vehicles. Also, I'm very glad there's that safety valve thing at the end there, where the cabinet members, both myself and Councillor Stagg there, just in case the uptake's too low, we can review it, we can amend it. So meaning it's a living document as it goes on. As I say, it is a very extensive piece of work there. But yeah, my thanks to all officers involved in that as always. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you much for the work on this. Can I ask Andy a couple of questions? In paragraph 3.6 and 3.7, you talked about the additional funding that we're applying for from the government to be able to support people to be able to get newer and better vehicles. Yeah. I'm particularly concerned about the cost of the wheelchair accessible taxis, because these cost £60,000. At the moment, the contribution we're talking about is £4,000 to be able to buy one, which is pretty small beer. Can you update us about whether the government has come up with any additional cash? Because I know we've said here we're looking up to 15,000.
Yeah, so before the end of last year, we went through the processes of reviewing that, getting increasingly aware of the shortfall, and we've been engaged with local communities who are relevant to this, and a joint letter has been issued, I understand, to the Secretary of State, which involves 4 different local authorities, including ourselves, which highlights the shortfalls of this funding coming forward, but also the complexities of the matter when it comes to competition from app-based models, when it comes to obviously the impact of COVID, when it comes to some legislative loopholes in this country, which means there's competition from outside local authorities, from kind of private hire as well. So that letter has been issued. We did put forward justified funding for 15,000 per wheelchair accessible vehicle. We are yet to hear back from JACU at the moment on their response to the FBC as a whole, let alone the funding that we've requested and we've suggested is necessary.
So Andy, can I ask, if we don't get the money to do the upgrade, I think this is very difficult for people who are trying to invest in wheelchair accessible vehicles at very great cost. Are we able to ask government to exclude these vehicles from being penalised within the clean air zone because the government hasn't come up with enough cash to be able to make sure that the owners of these vehicles have got suitable help to make sure that they can afford to replace them?
As has been kind of our approach all the way through, we'll do whatever we can our side to help everyone with the money that we do have initially. For example, that will include what we've been looking into is retrofitting vehicles. A little while back, there was quite a lot of negativity generally in the industry and other local authorities, I guess, relating to retrofitting, for example. And so we've done a lot of research into that, and we're continuing to do that as one option to help people where we can. It's not a full answer, but it's one area that we think we may be able to help some. The way that all of this is designed, the rounds and the criteria and the opportunity to add some prioritization if we need to, that is designed like that so that, as you say, it can be an ongoing active approach to this funding. So we have regular communication through the official lines to JACU, and we'll continue to monitor this, and we'll continue to put case forward where we would hope to be able to kind of reallocate funding if we can. And we have our kind of liaison with other local authorities as well. So it's a very kind of transparent and pressing situation, yeah.
So, Andy, I think therefore what I'd like to say is if government, because this is all government imposed, this is not our choice, this is all government imposed, the whole thing. If the government are not prepared to come up with sufficient money to be able to make it economically viable for people, taxi drivers to be able to change their wheelchair accessible vehicles, then I think if retrofitting can work, that's great. But if none of that works, then I think we need to be saying to government that it is not right for these vehicles to be charged within the clean air zone because they provide such a vital service to people who are disabled. There are not that many of them, and they're an enormously costly investment for taxi drivers. So if we could do that, I would be grateful.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that a yes, Sandy?
We'll continue to look at that, yes.
Yeah, I want us to formally write to the government, or whichever bits of it you're in dialogue with. I'm happy to help draft something.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else, colleagues, on this one? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you,
Haley, and everybody else involved in the team. That's most useful. Thank you. I see that Mr. Stoneman has appeared and is loitering at the bottom of my screen. Mike, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Excellent. It's lovely to see you. I'm
Hello.
sorry if we discombobulated you by reversing the order.
That's all right.
But we thought you were interesting.
Okay.
We may be wrong, but
no, I'm sure you're right.
So, going back to the beginning, Mike, could you just walk us through the report about the investment in specialist educational facilities for kids with special educational needs, what the plan the council's come up with for doing this, and the effect in terms of what we're able to do to support these incredibly vulnerable kids?
Yeah, okay, so I'll give you a bit of background very briefly. So we've been working on an SEND strategic accommodation review for the past 2 years, which was completed at the back end of last year, and that set out then a 5-year programme of works to deliver on the demand that we know is coming through the system. So this is for our most complex special education needs in the city, as well as some alternative provision as well for those children who have particular issues around social, emotional and mental health issues. And what we've tried to do is come up with a very inclusive strategy. We had at one point a number of years ago thought about creating a brand new special school in the city which could cater for all the demand that was coming through the system. But we've moved away from that, one because it meant just one location, and it's much better if we can spread this across the city. Two, the capital costs were very significant, so we've been looking at a system whereby we can expand some of our current facilities as well as some potential new provision. And also mindful of the impact on the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant, because the pressures on there have been significant. So we've come up with a plan, and that's set out in the report. It's a 5-year strategy, and we've been asking for funds to cover the first 3 years of the projects that we've got lined up. So that includes, for example, a new inclusion centre in one of our mainstream schools. It includes expansion at Cliffdale Primary Academy. It includes expansion of some of the facilities that come under the Mary Rose Academy, in particular the facility called the Lantern, which is in Fratton. Some of you will know used to be where the Harbour School was based. and a number of small-scale grants that we're going to help to update facilities in our mainstream schools so they can become more inclusive. We do have further plans, and we're going to be funding some of the feasibility work around that. So, for example, a post-16 facility at Redwood Park, but we don't have the detailed cost of that until we've done that feasibility work. So that's what we're planning, and we've got plans in place. They're on track to deliver what we need for September, but obviously we've got a significant programme of works to deliver the places we need over the course of the next 3 years. If we don't do this, then it creates all sorts of issues. One, if we don't have those places available in the city, in the locations that we've got them planned, then we're going to have to start looking at out of city placements, which one is not good for the families involved, but two, it's very expensive. So that's one big issue. And then, of course, it also impacts on the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. So if we are funding those out of city placements, then that puts further pressure on the high needs block, which is already under considerable pressure. So we think we've got a really clear strategy. We've got good buy-in from all of the stakeholders in the city, in particular our special schools, but also our mainstream schools as well. And as long as we deliver what we've got in the programme, then we should be able to meet the demand that's coming through the system.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Susie Horton.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mike, for presenting that report. I've jotted down a few things just in case Mike couldn't make the meeting, so I'll try and pick out of my notes, not too much repetition. But I just want to just give a little bit more on the background about the increasing numbers of special educational needs children. And it's a well-known fact this is happening nationally. There's all sorts of, conjecture about why that is the case, but Portsmouth is looking at increased special educational needs numbers, and particularly in the categories around social and emotional and autism, and also the high needs block, the most vulnerable children. So I think it's really important that we have we're thinking ahead and we're planning for those. And what I'm really proud about is not only the careful and the sort of consistent and systematic methodology about predicting these numbers. So we're not talking about numbers in a blanket way. We're talking about having a real sense of actually specific cohorts of children. And this methodology has led to this plan. Just a couple of other points, that it's needs led, and this is where the inclusion part is so important, that we need to do our best for those children in our city. And it's not for us to tell them what their needs are, it's for us to work with them and their families, looking at their needs and getting the most appropriate education for them. I personally, my background is my first teaching career is I taught in an incredibly inclusive borough in Newham in East London, which was renowned at that point for leading on inclusion. So I've experienced it myself in the classroom, and I know how empowering it can be. And just this week, actually, we've heard of a couple of cases where work around creating facilities in school to allow that child to be included has genuinely transformed the life of those children and their families, as well as doing the right thing. So the last point I want to make, I mean, the report details and Mike has already covered this, around the balance between special educational needs, specialist provision, I should say, and expanding those numbers. And that is where those children need to be in that specialist provision. But also the alternative provision. And what's really brilliant is that we have excellent in-house architects who now are experts in architecture for special educational needs provision within schools. And they bring in local community artists, they bring in their knowledge of the city, and they are kind of a homegrown team. And it really is quite humbling and also very exciting to hear the discussions around the building. And for me as an educator, to hear how that is around the quality of educational experience of of those kids. So I think it's a really aspirational plan, but it's a well thought plan. And I thank, obviously I thank the officers for all their work on it, but I also thank my colleagues, because I know I'm a pain when I champion this all the time, but I don't want any child in Portsmouth not to have the best education that they possibly could have. So thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. That's both Susie and Mike. I've got a couple of questions, Mike. First of all, you talked about one secondary school where we're going to do a significant investment. Where is that, can I ask?
One secondary school. Well, we're investing with the Thinking Schools Academy Trust. So we are looking at an inclusion centre which will span Penhale Infant School and also across to the Portsmouth Academy. So we've got an inclusion centre covering both primary and secondary across that facility. Okay. That's in the plan at the moment.
And Portsmouth Academy is the girls' school?
It was, yeah. It's a co-educational school now, yeah.
Okay. My second thing is that you talk about the high needs block.
Yeah.
That's a lump of money for particular kids. If there was more pressure on it, what then wouldn't happen? So is that money coming out of schools or?
Yeah, no, it's part of the dedicated schools grant, of which there are 4 blocks, one of which is the high needs block, which is probably the block that's under the greatest pressure because of the increasing numbers that we're seeing coming through the system. Numbers of pupils which have an education and healthcare plan. So yes, there's a lot of pressure on that particular block. It's money that goes straight out to schools for those places, for those children. Yeah. If we go over what's in that block, then we have to dip into the carry forward, which we do have some within the dedicated schools grant, but you know, eventually that will run out. So yeah, so we have to manage that budget really, really carefully going forward.
Okay. All right, thanks so much indeed. I suppose my question, Mike, is not for you. It wouldn't be appropriate. But at the budget meeting, both our Labour and Conservative colleagues voted to not support this and this money not to happen and this money not to go to kids or children with special educational needs. And my question is, why on earth did they think that was not necessary in Portsmouth? It seems, Mike, you and Susie have put an incredibly good case of why children with special educational needs in this city need that support. And if they don't get it, then there'll be real pressure on other schools. So my question is, why on earth did our Labour and Conservative councillor colleagues vote against this? We will have to ask them. They have to be responsible for their actions, but it is a very, very surprising decision on their behalf. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful, Mike. We've got your other report, item 14, the Capita One system. Mike, can you just explain to us what that's going to do, why it's important?
Yeah, so briefly, the Capita One system effectively supports all the pupil data that we have on pupils in our schools. It's an absolute critical system for a variety of purposes which are set out in the report. Without it, we couldn't deliver many of our statutory functions. And at the moment, it's working. The system does work. We've had it for over 10 years, but it's starting to creak. And what we're seeing, disappointingly, from Capita is a lack of investment. And in fact, as on top of that, increased maintenance costs year on year. Our expectation is that Capita may at some point pull out of this market. They've already sold off parts of the business already, and we are having to look at a potential future replacement for this. If we leave it until the point at which Capita disappear from the market, then we will be scrabbling around with many other local authorities trying to find another provider. What we want to do is actually do some planning for this, have the funding in place which allows us to go forward with a procurement exercise and ensure we get the system that is right for Portsmouth City Council. We are looking at a range of providers. We're doing some soft market testing at the moment, but yeah, it is critical we get this right. And at the moment, we are losing confidence in the system that we have been working with for many, many years. That's the reason we're doing it.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Susie, anything you'd like to add?
Of course. No, I just think this is one of those ones. We all know that money's tight, and we've just had an item which talks about the needs of the most vulnerable children. So that's a no-brainer. You've got vulnerable children, the money needs to follow them. When it comes to things like IT, I think there's 2 to 3 steps that you have to go through to realise the impact of this. It's a cold thing to say an IT system, but it's not a cold thing to say children who are excluded, children who have special educational needs, children who are on reduced timetables, children looked after children. When you realise that this investment in IT actually is the system that holds those children safe, you can see why, yet again, colleagues, I've been banging on the door saying this is really important. I don't want to wait for it to reach a point where there's a crisis and you realise that those children are now vulnerable. You want to plan ahead and get in systems that protect that catastrophe, but also that can lead to efficiencies so that you can have more money to spend on those other face-to-face things. So this system is really crucial for holding the directorate, the connections within the directorate together, and helping those vulnerable children.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Matthew Winnington.
Thank you. I'd just like to draw a parallel here to the investment that's gone on in IT in the adult social care portfolio, and how critical it is and what a difference it's made having up-to-date, secure. Let's remember, this is really important. Secure IT. This is about safeguarding the information and the data on the most vulnerable children in our city. Just as the new IT systems in adult social care is about protecting the information and data and the safeguarding of the most vulnerable adults in the city. Investing in IT, secure, good IT is absolutely critical to any organisation. Can you imagine what would happen if we had mass data breaches, if you had real issues because we didn't invest in our IT? It would be devastating. So anyone who thinks that IT spending is just something they can use for political gains is wrong. It is absolutely critical that we safeguard and look after our most vulnerable children and adults in this city, and therefore investing in our IT systems, making sure that we can work across the council and outside the council with our partners to make sure that those children and adults are safeguarded is absolutely crucial. So I completely back this investment. It is absolutely critical, and anyone who thinks by taking out spending on IT because it looks easy and simple can be a way of getting a budget amendment in for some political reasons. It is actually contemptible. You should do your homework and you should look at what the real consequences of these silly game playing will do. So it's just a warning to other parties: don't get sucked into that silly game playing. This is really important, and this is all about the safeguarding of our most vulnerable children in the city.
Thanks, Matthew. Mike, can I take you back to 3.2, paragraph 3.2? Well, probably Mike and Susie. I'm very, very worried. I think we need to be clear about this. There was a specific recommendation in the Labour Party amendment to the budget that we don't invest in this. But Mike, your advice in this report says that if we don't have an IT system that works, we can't allocate places for kids to go to school.
Yeah, but the admissions process relies wholly on this system. Yeah.
So it had thousands of children just wandering around aimlessly in the city with no places to go.
Well, we'd make sure that wouldn't happen, but yeah, but we'd really struggle to have a coherent offer as we do now. Yeah.
We'd not know which children are not attending school, and we've got a really big push to get attendance up, not just in terms of the educational benefits of that, but also to try to make sure that young children are not exploited when they should be at school and they're not, and they're out wandering the streets. So we wouldn't know about that. And from my point of view, coming from a social work background, knowing where kids aren't at school is really important to make sure that we protect them from exploitation, and therefore not having a system that gives us that information means that we're at a disadvantage in trying to protect children, and therefore it seems to me this is the right thing to do, and I am very surprised that our Labour colleagues decided that this was not worth spending any money on. And Mike, I'm not going to ask you to comment on a political thing, but thank you very much indeed, Mike, for that. That was a very helpful and useful report. Thank you very much. And Mike, you can go back to, I know you weren't expecting to be here, which was a surprise to me because I presumed you'd want to come and talk to your reports. But anyway, you go back to whatever else you were doing, Mike.
Yeah, not a problem. No, thanks. Thanks, Gerald.
Okay, item 10, Cabbage Field Row, haven't update on progress. Joe, is this you?
Yes, it is, Leader. Thank you. So I'm going to, for the sense of brevity, I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible. So, Leader, you asked us to update the Cabinet on progress with the Cabbagefield Road development, to explain the benefits to social housing and Portsmouth of developing the site. Just going to skim over the background, but basically this site is in the Havant Borough Council local plan as suitable for residential development. We put a feasibility study to our internal strategic developments team in January of 2019. They started to work it up for us. We went to a pre-planning meeting in early April 19 with Havant colleagues, and after a review of their waiting list and ours and multiple discussions, we came forward with the idea of attempting to develop the site for council homes to be held within the HRA. We are expecting to share allocations for this site with Havant Borough Council on a 70-30 split, so 105 dwellings coming to circa that, 105 dwellings coming to the Portsmouth list and 45 to the Havant list. We want to test the tenure and allocation position through an outline planning application. There will be other matters within that application, so access, layout, scale, etc., with landscaping and appearance left as reserved matters. The decision to progress with a report to our Cabinet member solely to obtain an outline planning permission rather than the usual report request, which is for a full capital scheme, was taken to ensure that we had the certainty of the tenure and allocations for the development, and to ensure that the HRA didn't incur costs for a development that it couldn't bring forward as council homes. On the 25th of January, then, we brought the report to Councillor Sanders requesting, and he approved, I should say, a request for £260,000 of capital expenditure from the HRA to allow us to deliver an outline planning consent for a development of approximately 150 homes within that site. We've also obviously noted within the report that we'll be bringing back a report once the outline planning consent is achieved to detail the consent and its contents, and if appropriate to request a full capital scheme. The tenure and allocations position being confirmed is what's essential for us really understanding this site and its benefits for PCC. So that report is due back to to our Cabinet member in November, following the determination of that planning, and at that point we'll be able to look at things such as how we proceed with the development. Will they all be council homes? What would the delivery model be? And to nail down things like costs, etc. That's as brief as I can be, I think.
That's fine. If Councillor Darren Sanders is as brief, we will be pleased. Darren. But Darren, I do feel we should allow you to not be on mute.
Good afternoon to you as well, Gerald. Thank you very much, and thank you, Joe, for this report. For me, this is when you're in charge of a city or want to be in charge of a city, you have to be responsible, both financially and socially. And one of the key aspects of that is to make sure you can house people. And so when this report came to me in January, this had been a site that had been left derelict for years. We know that we inherited a plan. We didn't inherit no plan for building council houses. So I was delighted when the idea of using this site came forward to build houses to get people off our waiting list. And the sort of numbers of houses that Portsmouth would get if we go ahead, should we go ahead with this plan, is about 5% of our waiting list. That's 5% of people, more than 100 families who are wanting a home, who don't have a home now, don't have a home they need now, and can get one. That to me is a responsible way forwards. And I was delighted when there was absolutely no opposition from my Conservative and Labour colleagues to this scheme. Absolutely delighted. Not a peep until we got to the budget meeting. Susie has explained the irresponsibility of the Labour Party in sacrificing a vital system that will help the lives of some of the most vulnerable in the city. And we have done the right thing, the responsible thing. This time it is the Conservatives, because the Conservatives instead took a hit, wanted to take a short-term rush of money rather than invest in the long term, in something that is not only, I believe, socially irresponsible, but financially irresponsible as well. What our Conservative colleagues wanted to do at the budget meeting was to use the £6 million receipt that they were going to get on various things, including council tax deferment for a year, which means you get double the pain the following year. And that's what they would use the £6 million for. Yet by going down this approach, instead of taking a £6 million short-term rush, we would be getting £800,000 a year in extra income every single year if this development went through. And we would also get the benefits of more than 100 homes not being on our waiting list any longer. This is both the financially responsible and socially responsible thing to do. I did look at our Conservative colleagues' proposals in detail, as officers and fellow Cabinet colleagues know, and then I found out what the figures were. And I think we as a city owe it to the people, especially as we're coming out of a pandemic, to be responsible both financially and socially. This does that, and I'm terribly sorry our Conservative colleagues' approach does not, which makes me sad because we should all be working together. Gerald, I realise that may not be the 20 seconds you were after, but I hope it explains the situation and the responsible approach officers recommended to me, and I was delighted to take forwards.
Thank you, Darren. Very helpful. Councillor Instag.
Yes, I'll be very brief. Am I right in assuming that if this doesn't go ahead, those 105 families will still be, or some of them anyway, will still be in a temporary accommodation bed and breakfast? Because
I didn't know whether you wanted me to.
Well, I'm not a dictator, so I don't mind. I mean, I'm happy to offer some context.
Let's go to Jo first on the basis that she's employed to do this.
So there are 813 people on the waiting list at the moment that have expressed an interest in Lee Park. There were at the time of writing, I haven't checked it today, but at the time of writing, there were 125 families in temporary accommodation. I haven't cross-referenced, if I'm honest, the 813 to the 125, but I do think we have to be pragmatic. That is likely to be people in there.
Okay, Darren?
Thank you.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, we owe it to everyone. There's properties like the former Somerstown Community Centre, which are used for temporary accommodation. Hopefully some buildings that we want to use for rough sleepers, if things don't happen in the way that we think will happen, can be used for people to get people in temporary accommodation also on our waiting list as well. So we're very keen to do that, and that's another good reason to take this forwards.
Okay, and I think I have heard the figure that of those 105 families, if we're having to look after people in temporary accommodation, it's not that's not picked up by rents of other council tenants, that's picked up by council taxpayers across the city. My understanding is that cost for 105 families is around £2 million a year that council taxpayers would have to pick up if the Conservative proposals had gone through. It's very surprising that didn't feature in what they said in their amendment. But anyway, okay, folks. So are you happy with this report, ladies and gentlemen, and happy to accept it?
Yes.
I've got my hands up.
Oh, Matthew, sorry, I haven't seen you. My apologies.
So I'll just be very brief, and it's just about the context really. When we look around the country and we see councils who are struggling, who have either effectively gone bankrupt or on the verge of bankruptcy, it's because they've sold off the family silver. you would have thought that the Conservative opposition on this council might have learned something from what happens when you sell off the family silver. You only have to look at Northamptonshire. You also look at other Conservative, which was Conservative run. You also have to look at Conservative run Cheshire East and Shropshire, who are in dire straits because they've sold off their family silver and they are in dire straits. There are others as well that are around the country, but you should use your assets and you should invest in them. You shouldn't sell them off for short term. Again, as Councillor Sanders said, short-term political gain or perceived political gain, which actually all it's going to do is just defer the pain, and it's going to do the people of the city no good if we have an administration who comes in and flogs everything off, because then we'll be left with nothing in the city, nothing to invest in for our people, and nothing to provide the housing that people need.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, colleagues, I think we've said we're happy with that report. Let's move on to item 9, supporting people in financial hardship. I think Mr. Sage, Mark, hello and welcome.
Thank you very much, Leader. So yes, I'm presenting this information report on work the council has been doing to support people who are in financial hardship since the start of the pandemic. I know Cabinet is aware that the pandemic has had a negative impact on many residents' finances, with families with children and those with the lowest household incomes more likely to have experienced a negative financial impact. The action the council has taken has been summarised across a number of areas which are outlined in the report, so I won't go into them in detail, but those areas being information and advice for residents, local welfare provision, action on fuel poverty, support for digital inclusion, discretionary financial support, help for our city council tenants, and across all of that, the partnerships that the council is involved in which support people in financial hardship. Just for Cabinet to note, in relation to local welfare and discretionary financial support, since this report was written, we've been notified by the Department of Work and Pensions that the COVID Winter Grant Scheme funding has been extended by just over 2 weeks to the 16th of April, with up to an additional £266,000 available for Portsmouth. The additional funds that we can receive will be used to extend what we're already doing, and they will need to be mobilised rapidly to make sure that we're able to use that resource before the scheme ends on the 16th of April. So Cabinet is not required to make a decision on that, but to note the plans to use the additional funds to help more people and provide additional assistance through the Easter holidays. So just in terms of the purpose of the report really is to outline the range of areas where the council's directly involved in providing support for people in financial hardship, and to note the work of teams across the council and the collaboration with the voluntary sector, including in particular Hive Portsmouth, to tackle poverty in the city, and that this work will continue to be developed as we move to recovery from the pandemic. So that was really, I mean, the detail is in the report, but obviously happy to take any questions and provide any additional information if needed.
And Mark, I think I need to place on record my thanks both to you and everybody who's worked within the council to do this, and also the huge numbers of people who've worked as volunteers to support this. The St Margaret's food bank is very close to me, and I've been down to give things and to go and talk to people, and it's been a tremendous service. I've been really, really pleased with what they've done. But the way in which the City Council stepped in when the government said they wouldn't fund food vouchers for families, for children who get free school meals over holidays and half terms, and I'm very proud that we instantly stepped in to support Margaret Radford's campaign, which was completely right, and we'll continue to do that. So I think we've done a good job to try to support this. I think we're all conscious that there are people who live on very little money all the time, but during the pandemic, this work has been good. So I've got Councillor Hugh Mason who wants to come in.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is a very impressive short report. If you look at what it covers a tremendous range of things which this council did. And I think there are 3 points which I from their report, which I would bring out and I think needs to be emphasised. The first, paragraph 3.5, is the speed at which we worked. The speed at which this council took up any opportunity which was going, and also the speed at which we reacted to needs as soon as we saw them. I think that speed is something which my colleagues in other councils were most impressed with. Very few other councils worked at anything like the speed over such a wide range of provision as we did. I think, Mark, your team has every right to be proud of what you did there. Secondly, paragraph 5.4, carrying on from this, it is the flexibility of the way in which we worked. This speed, flexibility putting £20,000 into community meal provision, finding where the community meal provision was actually being given and making sure that the money was available to it. That, I think, is something, again, which needs to be emphasised. But probably most of all, in 6.3, the sudden drop in income, because this is something which people are going to find over the next many, many months, because the epidemic, the pandemic, is not over. Its effects on the economy will continue for the foreseeable future. We're going through a period of tremendous economic transformation. Our economy in this city, as across the whole of the country, is changing very rapidly. And this will result in quite a number of people having a sudden drop in income and needing the kind of services which we're providing. So it is imperative that we continue with this type of work for the foreseeable future. And I don't think you'll be out of a job anytime soon, Mark.
Thank you. Well, Mark, that's high praise. I think some people may not know, but Councillor Hugh Mason has been cooking meals for the homeless for the last 26 years at his church in Southsea, so he's got real hands-on experience of this. So to get praise in that way from somebody who's got that hands-on experience, not just talking about it but doing it, is good. I've got Councillor Susie Horton. Susie, you're on mute like I was. Yeah, you're on.
Okay, I'm sorted now. Just want to jump. I obviously have been tangentially involved in this with the bit, particularly around free school meals, the holiday and activity fund, and digital poverty and inequalities. And I just, as a first point, I just want to say this is another example of where we've taken something and actually worked cross portfolio, cross directorate, and with really, really effective outcomes. So the point I just want to make is that, and it sort of picks up on Councillor Mason's last point, is that this whole pandemic has been a really unequal experience, and there's been some obvious people, but there's also been a lot of people that you wouldn't expect to have been impacted in the way that they have. And I think we need to make sure that our eye is appealed and that we're there to support them in any way that we can. I was just jotting down a list of people who have been involved in this. For me, is like obviously the council officers, and massive thank you for getting this really effective strategy off the ground so quickly, and also the flexibility to use the funds as they've changed and as feedback has come in. For example, I've raised an issue once about breakfast clubs, but in reality, as the government changed its position about whether kids should be back in school or not, that had to be flexible. So but there's school staff as well, the voluntary and community sector, obviously the Hive and shaping I've had a lot to do with on the digital strategy. But also I think we need to give a shout out to residents in the city, because actually not everybody is in need. A lot of people have stepped up and engaged and have responded to things that we've asked for. And also, last but not least, the parents themselves, because they have been part of the solution so many times, either in helping themselves or helping other people in their community. So it really has been a joint effort, and I am great thanks to Mark and his team for using that money as efficiently as possible. And just one final point on the free school meals. Someone said to me yesterday something like, why are you doing free school meal vouchers when the kids are back at school? Like the legacy of this pandemic for some people is going to be long term, and we need to do everything we can. And I'm really proud. Last point, promise. Keep thinking of more things. Last point is I'm really proud of the fact that when we looked at the Holiday and Activities Fund money, which came from the government, and it looked very much like when you're done with your winter grant, now you can move on to your Holidays and Activities Fund, and we can tick that. It's the Holidays Activities Fund money shouldn't be an either or. It should be an and. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've prioritised free school meals over the next holidays, plus for those families that need it, access to the Holiday and Activity Fund money provision that's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Councillor Lee Hunt. Lee, you're on mute.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mark, and thank you to all the staff. I wanted to really pick up with Susie because the council, there's no question about it, as Hugh has indicated, and Mark, the council is showing great leadership on this matter, but the great leadership was enabled by the voluntary sector in particular, and they're a very important partnership with us. People like Beth Saunders from Helping Hands to the St Margaret's Church, all the food banks and so on. So it's very important for us today, whilst we're talking about this, to reflect the importance of the voluntary sector in Portsmouth, which is quite incredible. And the council could not do nearly as much without the input from so many volunteers citywide in all sorts of forms. Too many to mention, and that is quite incredible. But even when my nipper and I and my family stepped in to do some support when it first went off, it was incredible, as Susie, Councillor Holden's just mentioned, how the people of Portsmouth looked after their own. They were coming to my house from 8 through till midnight sometimes, bringing shopping bags of food and money, and we reckon about £10,000 worth of food and other donations went through our house back out into the community. You know, redistribution of wealth and redistribution of food by a host of volunteers who are offering help too. And we cannot underestimate the enormous benefit of the network of volunteers right across our city. And I'd just like to emphasise Ken today, because it's here, we could not do what we do with the wonderful help of officers enabled by so many volunteers and hardworking and very kind people.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lee. Colleagues, are you happy to accept Mark's report and to note our thanks to Mark and everybody who's worked on this over the pandemic? So thank you. I think it's been a very impressive set of work. Thanks, Mark. Okay, item 8, community infrastructure levy crowdfunding platform. Is this you, Ian?
It is indeed, Leader, yes.
Lovely to see you.
Well, I'll keep this relatively brief, members. As I know you are aware, 15% of all the community infrastructure levy collected by the city is ring-fenced into a neighbourhoods pot to be spent on a local level rather than on a citywide level. The officer team, supported by members, of course, have been working on ways to maximise that opportunity to support communities and ward members to make sure that that money that's collected is spent and goes out there to support the communities where development is occurring. This is the latest plan to assist that process. Crowdfunding as a alternative funding source is working well in the city already. We have a crowdfunding platform set up for small business that is doing good work to support both small business generally and particularly the COVID recovery stress that small medium enterprise is suffering for. This proposal brings the crowdfunding platform into the realm of community infrastructure levy for neighbourhoods. In truth, it doesn't really change much of what actually you deliver. It's giving an opportunity for communities to crowdfund in parallel with your current governance structure for delivering community infrastructure levy at the neighbourhood level. So currently, community infrastructure levy projects are brought forward and agreed by ward members, having been assessed by officers for their legal compliance and the financial ability of the ward to support it. That is already being done in a way that is partly supported by local fundraising. By putting this process in place, it gives a more structured and an easier way for local fundraising to be done in parallel with the awards given directly by you through the community infrastructure levy. Consequently, the proposal and the recommendations laid out in the report are fundamentally twofold. One, that we do set up the crowdfunder platform for this purpose. That has an administrative and marketing cost. That's £5,500 for the next 3 years that will be covered by the community infrastructure levy administration charging. And two, that we create the earmark reserve of £50,000. To be clear, though, that earmark reserve is a reactive reserve, so it does rely on community groups, ward members bringing forward projects up to an individual crowd-funded amount of £5,000, so that those ward members can then decide to match fund that through the crowdfunding platform and support those projects. So that reserve is, of course, embedded within your existing governance and financial structures and will be reactively called upon as and when projects come forward on the basis that individual wards can support and afford those projects. This whole process would be managed by your planning obligations spending officer, the officer who already supports ward members and community groups to ensure this money is spent. And he obviously leads on the key issues of assessing projects against their compliance with Regulation 59 of the SEAL regulations to ensure these are legitimate community infrastructure. As I say, this is adding to your current processes. It doesn't change your governance structure. Still, of course, embeds the preeminence of members, ward members in particular, as the decision maker on the award of community infrastructure levy, but provides a new platform to ensure that where local communities want to raise money locally in parallel with the money that development is giving through community infrastructure levy, there is a simple and transparent way that they can do that, and we can support them to support growth in their communities. So the recommendations are to fund the setup of that crowdfunder platform, £5,500 in recommendation 1, confirm that our aspiration is that £50,000 of crowdfunding to be matched against that's raised, and then obviously to agree that it be set up and delivered under the normal delegated processes. Happy to take any questions, members.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steve Pett.
Not a question, Ian, because as you know, I'm very well acquainted with this, having worked really closely with the economic development team, Mark Pembleton and Kim Pellett in particular. And Kim's done outstanding work with our existing crowdfunder scheme over the last year. There's 20 plus businesses in Portsmouth that might not have survived the pandemic if we hadn't had that scheme in place. That's dozens of jobs that exist today and are going to continue to be productive and generate some really good social enterprise activity and across many of them in the city moving forward. A couple of examples, Councillor Hugh Mason, who's with us today, and the St Jude Ward councillors used their ward SIL through our existing scheme to support the Select Dream scheme that was delivered to change Knighton Lee from having whitewashed windows with boards on them to some really attractive artwork down there that was greatly appreciated by local businesses in brightening up the area. And then, of course, we had the We Create market over the road that created further activity and really helped during the pandemic. And the We Create themselves used, through Portsmouth Creates, used the crowdfunder system for that, and also the We Believe project that gave micro commissions to local artists last year. 20 local artists not supported by any of the government funding anywhere, couldn't get any help, but they all got £500 micro commissions through us and our partnership with Shaping and Crowdfunder UK to help them get through the tough times that we saw last spring. We've also seen another project, which is the Corner Collective. You might remember the former Zen Station store in Albert Road, quite a big corner unit. That's been taken over by a collective of local artists who are going to develop it as an art studio with some joint curation and some creative studio space in there, which is going to help to further revitalise Albert Road. So there's been we've already had examples amongst those, and the one of Councillor Mason's I referred to, of where Ward Councillor Sill has already been added into a crowdfunder. This is an opportunity to set it up as a separate scheme and, in simple terms, to get more bang for our buck. When we are, as ward councillors, engaged with our communities and we're able to work with them to develop community projects for their benefit, this enables us as their city councillors to say, yeah, we'll back you in your scheme. You as the local community can help do some fundraising. We'll support you with that. And if you're successful, that means that we can use our ward SIL to effectively double the amount of money that's being raised up to a value of £10,000 and beyond. It also doesn't preclude them from getting other sponsors, business donations, etc. into that, which can expand the fundraising even further. We've got aspirations for a greening crowdfunder that we actually allocated money towards in our capital budget this year, which will be the third arm of this. And look how far we've come in a year. Now, a year ago, we were talking about starting to move crowdfunder forward. It took us a while to get it off the ground. We used the pandemic to accelerate that process, and amazing things are happening across Portsmouth. It's something that we should be hugely proud of, and it's not just members of the administration that have supported these schemes, it's other councillors as well. So I know this is something that's going to have cross-party support and be hugely welcomed. And as Ian said, it's not a raid on anybody's existing ward SIL pot. It's a vehicle to enable there to be a confirmed process for linking that ward SIL into the what will be this expanded crowdfunder scheme. So thank you for bringing it forward and explaining it so well to us, Ian. Members, I do hope everybody's going to support this. I think it's fantastic, and it's exactly what councillors should be doing, which is increasing the number of vehicles available to us to be able to work ever more closely with our communities. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, colleagues, are you all happy with this? Great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to item 7, which will feel slightly less as if we're all on the same page. Colleagues, just before we get here, I was going to say what my recommendation of the Cabinet will be at this point. I'm very distressed to see the deputation from 2 of the Eastleigh and Craneswater councillors. I thought the level of vitriol and viciousness in it was unpleasant and really not of what I'd expected of any individual who's a councillor here. But I'm also very conscious there's a difference of view between the councillors in that ward, and therefore I think I prefer people to work together. And I'm very pleased that the councillors from Milton and the councillors recently in Craneswater, including the 2 Conservative councillors who penned this very unpleasant thing, have jointly put money in together for the Eastleigh Beam engine, because it's on the boundary of wards and it's best to work together. But my suggestion would be that actually we should find money from the central pot to be able to do this mural. I think everybody likes the mural. It's a great landmark in the city, but clearly it needs finishing, and Mark Lewis has done a good job with it. But I think we'll need to find the £5,000 from central money and not use the Eastleigh Craneswater community infrastructure levy grouping of funding, because the councillors there have not come to a view. So Chris, I see you put your hand up. I think we can either find this from the Leaders Initiative budget or something else like that. Chris, have you got a name of a budget head for this?
Yes, thanks, Leader. I was going to suggest that you might want to resolve that this is met from the Cabinet Reserve.
Fine, happy with that, colleagues. Okay, so if that's what I'm going to be proposing, therefore it won't come from the Eastleigh Craneswater SIL money, but this will happen. Anna, do we presume that people have read the deputations, or what do we need to do?
But, I mean, they've been sent round to everyone, but I mean, shall I read them?
They need to be read out, Anna.
Do you want the councillors first or Mark Lewis?
I really don't mind.
Well, we received Mark Lewis's first, so I'll start with him.
Do that first then.
Right. Mark Lewis, muralist and founder, Art and Soul Traders CIC in the Arts Lodge. What we are proposing to use this small grant for is to give the mural and immediate area some much needed TLC, as it has been 11 years since the new mural was undertaken. I first initiated, designed and raised the funds for the original mural back in 1997 and started an arts group to undertake the painting in 1998. This idea came about when I lived in the area. Tourists were always looking lost, holding maps in their hands, pointing every direction. This is where the idea of the map came from. After the original mural was completed, a survey by Portsmouth City Council established that local trade increased by an incredible 30%, giving a much needed economic boost to the community's businesses, creating in excess of £1 million whilst totally transforming the area. The materials we use are mineral paints, which the official lifespan is over 100 years. To secure the future and maintenance of the mural, we took over the lease of the wall for 99 years from Southlands Housing Association, which continues now with Vivid. This high-profile and visual iconic landmark has also had the power to reduce antisocial behaviour whilst building on community cohesion. The project created in the design stages, workshops and well beyond the completion of the painting. We subsequently won the Best Landscaping Award in 1999 from the Portsmouth Society. The Strand City Map mural has also naturally become the only ever-changing public art mural in the world, where every year we come back to add more and more detail. The mural is simply loved and enjoyed by locals and visitors alike, with the residents dedicating memorials to loved ones or a unique advertising chance for local shops, business vans with even cars, boats, homes, and the list goes on, only limited by our imagination. We have another 76 years on our lease and would hope to pass the baton to the next generation of local artists, including my daughter. This would be through occasional grants while drumming up sponsorship to help create a living wage for the artists and ongoing maintenance. The fact that 2 ward councillors could actually oppose the city's most famous public art mural is just beyond belief and has created yet another controversy, with the Lib Dems starting a petition to save the Strand mural, which has received a lot of signatures from the public. It is disappointing to have to make a deputation to overrule an objection, which seems to be against all the ethics of their code of conduct that councillors should follow, whilst going against the majority of residents again can only have a negative effect on their forthcoming local election campaign. Even their colleague Flick Drummond was shocked to hear this when she stopped to chat and say how wonderful the mural was when I was painting the other day. Our city's reputation as a cultural destination took a real beating after the controversial eviction of the Arts Lodge in 2017, with national media attention, and will never return unless justice is seen to be done. Yet this objection to the Strand mural grant, for no logical reason, is just a continuation of these bullying tactics that need to stop before regaining the public's respect and the nation's heart. We have heard the many discerning voices that ask us why the Lib Dems, who fought and campaigned so passionately to save the Arts Lodge in 2016, has not yet offered us any alternative venue in the last 4 years, or just gave us this grant 3 years ago. We too are perplexed and disappointed by the lack of support, not only for a new venue, but any kind of funding or the continuous council tenders we keep getting rejected. I'm sure, as there are many good councillors, they will not put themselves through this predicament if they could help it, as it must be much easier to keep your word than publicly go back on it. This shows that the problems we have had with certain unelected council officers or councillors have yet to be resolved, as they still hold positions of power after all the evidence. You would think that we were asking for a large amount of money, but this grant is small compared with the costs associated with the upkeep of the wall, mural, sculpture and immediate area. The only reason they objected to this grant is that a substantial grant was given for it to be created in the first place, and people have been paying to appear on the mural. Here Councillor Stubbs is trying to insinuate that we've already received too much money and receiving public-private sponsorship is a bad thing, when his party's mantra is not to rely on public funding and create a business formula that is sustainable. Contrary to what Councillor Stubbs has written on social media, that the mural has already cost Portsmouth City Council £20,000 is untrue, as £10,000 was from Southsea Town Council in 2010, just before they were disbanded, and the funds were never allocated for any other local projects, so would have gone to waste. Portsmouth City Council has only ever paid in £5,000 over the last 23 years, and even this was hard to get, staggered in late payments and made difficult by many administration errors or hindrance. What makes all this situation even more absurd is that this fund is from developers, so it doesn't actually cost the council a single penny. A mural of this size, quality and longevity would cost between £50,000 to £100,000 in any city around the world. We were prepared to create it for just £8,000 in 1998 and £15,000 in 2010 due to the lack of funding, yet I was never prepared from the start to scrimp on the best materials or equipment, just wages. When growing up, a lot of my creative friends moved away to London, Brighton or abroad to make it, yet I was always determined to stay in my home city and try to create an art scene rivaling the others. When I look back at how we've been mistreated and our work hindered by the very people who are paid in good faith by us to support the arts community, I am left with a bad taste in my mouth. Our achievements stand out from the crowd, and no matter what happens, our legacy will live on for a very long time. It seems counterproductive when this city has such a celebrated multi-award winning and dedicated organisation and visionary artists still living and working here, yet the council will not support or promote us in any way. It is a scar on our city's cultural face for all to see around the world and needs addressing now it is in the spotlight. Here is an excerpt from Transparency International UK, who published a report on local government corruption in 2013 that you may find helpful for perspective. The conditions present in which corruption is likely to thrive, low levels of transparency, poor external scrutiny, networks of cronyism, reluctance or lack of resource to investigate, outsourcing of public services, significant sums of money at play, and perhaps a denial that corruption is an issue at all. On the other hand, the system of checks and balances that previously existed to limit corruption has been eroded or deliberately removed. Corruption need not involve the exchange of money through explicit bribes. Individuals might be influenced to breach their duties by gifts or the promise of favours, or by the prospect of being rewarded in future, perhaps by a job offer or preferential treatment or even blacklisting of others. I hope this is of help, and we anticipate that the outcome of this full Cabinet meeting is the right one, and further help and support will follow in the near future. Thank you for your time. Yours sincerely, Mark E.W. Lewis. And this is from Councillors Luke Stubbs and Linda Symes. We are really disappointed to have to make this representation. It is no secret that local politics can be pretty and ugly, and frankly some of it fits the observation about academic arguments that they are so bitter because so little is at stake. This, though, plumbs new depths. A cabinet with control a budget of more than 200 million once the public health and housing budgets are included has the cheek to run a campaign claiming helplessness in the face of opposition councillors with control over a few tens of thousands. Really, it's breathtaking. We know you can never accept responsibility and that you like to position yourself as being against the council, even when you are the council, but this is a new low. It is not true to say everyone behaves like this. We didn't when controlling the council, and despite our obvious political differences, I don't think the Labour Party would either. The fact is that the mural is not in danger. It was recreated a decade or so after being water damaged. It does not need more public money. It should also be pointed out that everyone who appears in the mural has been charged for the privilege, and that should provide a pot of money. We also have to point out that you clearly do not know where the ward boundaries lie. The open area near the roundabout is within St Jude ward. If you want to place a bench there, you need to use the St Jude allowance to fund it. Also, let us not forget that there used to be a bench there and it was removed as a focal point for antisocial behaviour. You were in control of the council at that point. Similarly with signage, anything located to the west of Waverley Road is outside Eastney and Craneswater. To agree this expenditure without the endorsement of local members would clearly be to go against the spirit of the national regulations. Given the boundary errors you have made, it would also be to go against the letter. You cannot approve this. Finally, we would ask that you pay heed to the words of long-serving former Lib Dem councillor Les Stevens when he wrote to us and to the news. With regards to the above mural, this has been a cash cow for Mark Lewis for some years, with income from various sources, including which he has conveniently forgotten £10,000 from Southsea Town Council when it was operational. No more public money should be handed over to support this artist and his cash cow mural he painted, so let him maintain it.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Matthew Winnington, as you're one of the local ward councillors.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to start by obviously agreeing with the proposal from Gerald, leader of the council. I think this is just a sorry affair all round. This is the absolute first time since we've had this new procedure. It's not that new anymore. I mean, it came in almost 3 years ago. This is the first time that we've ever had a SIL application have to come to cabinet because not because ward colleagues don't agree with something, and sometimes that happens where it's but it's where they've actively opposed it. They have actively gone out of their way to oppose this application for what is being described to me in an email from a resident this week as literally what this money is there for. And it is a community infrastructure levy that we get from developers for all of us in our wards around the city. And if this isn't community infrastructure, I really don't know what is. And this is to refresh and maintain this going well into the future, to make it sustainable into the future. So it's really sad this has happened. I'm extraordinarily disappointed with the attitude of my ward colleagues. They have not engaged with this at all. By their inference, by their naming of the person, I think this goes back to something that went on during their time running the council, and indeed when it was involving the person who created the mural in the first place. And unfortunately, I think this is very much a personality-driven thing, which is really sad. I mean, having vendettas or anything going against individual people by ward councillors is really not giving a very good show. And I'm ashamed on behalf of Eastern and Cranes Water that this has happened. I'm also slightly confused as well that this is coming from both of these councillors together. One of these councillors, Councillor Linda Symes, has been suspended from the Conservative Party since June last year, and yet in everything she does, she's part of a group with Luke Stubbs, who is a Conservative councillor. It surprises me that Councillor Stubbs would have anything to do with a councillor who's been suspended by the National Conservative Party for what were described at the time as or were allegedly racist posts. So bad, in fact, that Lee Rigby, the murdered soldier, whose image was used, his wife took such exception to one of the posts that Councillor Symes did that she said, I don't want this. This is nothing to do with what my husband would ever want, to promote hate speech and hate among people. And yet this person is still very much within the bosom of the local Conservatives in terms of working with Conservative colleagues, or former Conservative colleagues, hand in glove. 987 people have signed a petition to support the mural. 987. So nearly 1,000 people have supported it. That really shows how important this is to the city. It shows how important it is to the people as a whole, and really does show us that there is a groundswell of support for this. It really is something that I never wanted to have come to this forum. It should never have come here. It should never have been objected to. It was an absolutely legitimate way to put forward. And I'm really sad as well that for all the naysaying from Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Symes, they have not put forward any other suggestions for any use of sill in this ward, and they have not done so for at least the last 3 years. And to be honest, I can't ever recall them putting forward anything in all the years I've been on the council since this has been the way that it's been done. What I'm saying though today is that I am making a proposal for sill in the wards, for a new crossing, a new zebra crossing on the western end of Eastern Parade. I'm going to suggest that we use the ward sill to make sure that zebra crossing goes ahead, using it for what it's actually there for, rather than sitting on the sidelines and complaining about it being used. As that person who emailed me again said, it's literally what it's there for. So thank you, Leader, for the proposal. I completely back it. And I'm just really, really sad and ashamed that we're here today and having to take this action.
Okay, I've got Councillor Lee Hunt, followed by Councillor Hugh Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, to Mark, if he's listening, that I'm sorry about all the trouble you've had over a period of time going back to the Arts Lodge. We're all sorry. Certainly, within the Lib Dem group, we're definitely very sorry. If you've got any problems, Mark, I am the Heritage Champion for the city, one of my hats. If you have any difficulties at all with the things that you described in your deputation, I am available to you. Send me an email or message me or whatever. And if you need a hand or a friendly voice in the council, we're all friendly really, apart from a couple rather. Very, very happy to go over your requests and see what we can do, support what it is that you want to do around the city. And I'd like to then turn to the deputation from two people. You can see, some of you, why I got out of the Tory party with these people in there all those years ago. They have the same attitude back there, and it persists today. It's poisonous. The whole of the deputation was poisonous and unnecessary. And it's very sad to see their words full of bitterness and contempt for a member of the public, really, if you read between the lines. The almost enjoyment of using the words cash cow, which is quite a ridiculous thing to say, don't matter who said it, but then to repeat it in a deputation like this, I think that it brings their office into disrepute, and I think what they've said in their deputation brings the council into disrepute, and it really needs to go to a standards board hearing for the words that they've used in it, to see what other councils think of their conduct, and I will be forwarding it for investigation that way, because I think that what they've done is wrong, and I don't know why they've done it. I mean, this is a very popular destination. They could have got on board with Councillor Whittington in the same way they have done with East Beam Engine House, couldn't they? And made a big thing of this, and nobody would be here talking about it today. It's beyond me. Even according to Mark, and no reason to disbelieve it, Flick Drummond, a Conservative MP who lives in the ward, was very supportive. He used the word wonderful mural, quite different to what these two Conservative councillors are saying. I don't understand it. I don't see any electoral advantage in it to be quite so bitter and twisted in their deputation. You know, I don't think it's come from Luke Stubbs' deputation. I think he's been asked to say these words, and it's just full of bitterness. And I think it's a great pity, a great shame, as Councillor Whittington has said. The mural is much loved citywide. Let's focus on it more than that. And now, thanks to the initiative announced by the leader this afternoon, Mr. Lewis will be able to get down there in the confidence, knowing he's going to get the money to make sure that its upkeep is looked after, and he's going to do that with volunteers as well, because I know that he uses volunteers too. So very sad to see the deputation from the two Conservative councillors. Shocked? Not really. Unsurprised? Not really. They just have a thing, don't they? They just don't like arts. They're Luddites, and they just want to chase all this stuff away. And they don't like the idea of somebody else having a good idea, because they haven't got any darn good ideas of their own. The two of them should hang their heads in shame. And how anybody can vote for these people in our city.
Can I ask you to... Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
You were in danger of following into their footsteps.
Yes, indeed.
Let's keep them civil,
quite
please.
correct. Quite correct.
Mr. Mason, are you able to keep things civil? Or Dr. Mason, I should refer to.
Indeed. I think I only want to make 2 points. The first one is to emphasize something which has been mentioned by everyone, which is that this mural is well liked, it is well loved. It is something which appears in guides to Portsmouth. People are recommended to go and look at it, and it is certainly well worth looking at. The second thing is that Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Symes are only partially right. The lower 1/3 of the mural is in St Jude Ward. The building which the upper 2/3 of that mural is painted exists in Eastney Craneswater Ward. That being said, I am sure that I and my 2 ward colleagues, although from a different party, would be very happy to put St Jude Ward SIL money into maintaining this excellent piece of art in our city. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Pitt.
Yeah, famous last words, I know, but I wasn't going to speak on this, but I just wanted to remind everyone who might be watching.
Oh, sorry. I muted you by mistake. Steve.
I have unmuted myself.
I'm very sorry. My apologies.
It's all right. I forgive you, Leader. The conversation that we've just had about reconfiguring an element of ward SIL to enable local councillors to work jointly on projects with their communities for the betterment of their communities. Now, people may wonder why there was a petition run, and the reason there was a petition run is what we were proposing to do today would have been setting a precedent. So it was something that wouldn't have happened before, because normally ward colleagues, even if they're from different parties, are able to reach agreement on these things. What would have happened if we had approved this today? I am pretty certain I would have put a significant amount of money on the fact that this would have immediately been called in to scrutiny management by those 2 ward councillors, because they are absolutely determined that they are not going to allow that money to go forward. That would have created a further delay, possibly given the timing until after the local elections, giving Mark more uncertainty, and that's not fair. So by doing what we've decided to do today, it means that he can proceed with certainty that he's got that funding immediately. And I know that Councillor Winnington, that when I spoke to him before this meeting, that was his priority, and that's why we've taken this decision. So I think it's the right decision. I think it's important. My own personal experience of one of the ward councillors in Eastney and Craneswater who put in a deputation today was, I remember being on holiday back before we were running the council and getting urgent phone calls from a group of artists when that councillor had accused them of turning the area in Osborne Road into a ghetto by putting good quality street art and murals on the former casino building down there. That person at the time was the cabinet member for culture and leisure in this city. So there's the contrasts for you. We've worked with Portsmouth Creates and artists across the city to get micro commissions out to 20 artists who've fallen through the cracks. Councillor Mason and his colleagues work with our crowdfunder scheme to get the Select Dream installation at Knighton Lee. There's councils backed Portsmouth Creates with the We Create market at Debenhams, which has created huge amounts of revenue for struggling creatives during a pandemic. There are proposals being developed by Portsmouth Art and Light Festival in November to help the city to recover and have something positive to look forward to on the other side of the pandemic. And this mural is loved by the people of Portsmouth, Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Symes. You might not like that, but perhaps if you went and spoke to 987 people in your ward, you might know what they actually think, because it ain't your money, it's the money of the residents of Eastney and Craneswater, and it should be spent on what they want it to be spent on, and they have clearly told us to spend it on the mural to make sure it's there for the next decades for the people of Southsea to love and enjoy, as they quite clearly do. Sometimes, guys, you just don't get your way.
So, ladies and gentlemen, my proposal is to not go forward with a recommendation as written on the paper, but that the funding for this should come from the Cabinet Reserve and not from Community Infrastructure Fund money. Colleagues, are you happy with that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed. At this juncture, Leader, I'm terribly sorry, but I must go off to planning because we've got important decisions to
Enjoy
make.
planning, Councillor.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Lee, it starts at 3 p.m. today.
Oh, I'm back in the room.
Yes.
Just like that.
That was
if
the
by
quickest
magic.
planning meeting in history. But just so that you don't feel left out, Councillor Hunt, we will now move on to the review of the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. Now, Rachel, is this you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Rachel, hello. I'm sorry. I hope it's been of some interest that you've learned of other things that the council does. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add to the report that is here?
I can just give you a quick.
Or are you going to read all 300 pages to us?
I'll just give you some of the main points. To say there's obviously 3 recommendations in the report for the review of the 2013 Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. The Cabinet consider the report that's with the Cabinet report on the review, endorse the decision to undertake the programme of work to update the plan, and that this decision goes to full council for approval. It needs to go to full council as the Minerals and Waste Plan is part of the overall development plan for Portsmouth, alongside our Portsmouth plan as well. So we did take this decision to Cabinet 2 years ago when there was an initial 5-year review of the plan. It decided at that time the policies were still reasonably effective, but we'd look at it again in 2 years' time when there was more certainty around particular issues. So yeah, last year's review decided that it would be beneficial to update it to bring it more in line with more recent national policy guidance, as well as to update the evidence base, which would include a call for sites that would help give more certainty to the industry as well. So the draft timetable for that review is attached to the report as well. That includes a sort of public consultation. And yeah, just to say that most of this work will be led by Hampshire County Council. As it's a joint document, it might need some input from us as well as our financial support, and that the City Council will need to give democratic approval of all the drafts and decisions at each stage as well, starting with this one to undertake the review. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ashmore, are you around?
I am.
Do you want to add anything, Dave?
Just very briefly, thanks Rachel for bringing that here today. Thanks everyone involved in the report. Very comprehensive report, as has been remarked upon. You know, and it shows where we are and where things are going, literally in the case of the waste. So yeah, it serves our gratitude that you know, we're working together around Hampshire and our partners there, and keeps us compliant. So just thanks to officers. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy to send this on to full council? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Rachel, thank you very much for your work and your time. We'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at the council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5, Treasury Management. Mr. Ward, are you loitering?
I am, Leader. Thank you.
Excellent.
With your agreement, can I do them in the reverse order or the original order of the agenda? So we take item 4 and then item 5. There is a relationship between the two.
So, Chris, we had to reorder them on the basis that all the dull stuff was at the beginning of the thing, and your ones 4 and 5 counted as fairly dull.
Well, I thought you did all the dull items at the beginning, so all the exciting items. Sorry, Leader, I'm losing connection. Can I jump straight in?
Yes, Lee.
Okay. So item 4 of your agenda is the capital strategy, and again, this is for consideration by full council on the 16th of March. Capital strategy, in brief, the capital strategy sets out your capital investment aspirations for the long term, so over the next 10 years. It also describes how you go through the evaluation of proposals, so the decision-making process and the evaluation criteria. It also describes how some of that longer-term investment the extent to which it needs to be or is funded by borrowing. And then the report also goes on to talk about the overall both risk associated with borrowing and affordability of borrowing. The aspirations, some of them you will recognise because they're already part of your approved capital programme, and some of them aren't, but they are set out in Appendix 1. And in relation to the funding, particularly the funding from borrowing, that's set out, or that the affordability and risk associated with that, set out in a series of metrics that are described in the appendix to Part 2. I think the only one other point of note I'd make is that within the report, we describe the changes to the borrowing regime. So we describe the changes now around the terms of lending from the Public Works Loans Board, and they have now changed those terms such that it's not that borrowing purely for yield or primarily for yield is no longer allowed from the Public Works Loans Board. That's not to say that borrowing isn't allowed at all for anything that is revenue generating, but if the reason for the investment is only for yield, that's disallowed. If it has other objectives or primary objectives, that might be around housing, for example, and providing affordable housing for your residents, then in the main that is still allowed. But it's worth just recognising that. Nothing else to say on that item, but just to mention that this is more about the long-term and long-term financing and how we use capital resources to fund long-term investment.
Okay, so Chris, can I just ask on that issue, and I know this is going to go forward to full council, the strategy of doing, putting together a national property portfolio with money borrowed from the Public Works Loan Board, that would no longer be allowed by the government, am I right?
That's right, Leader, and it doesn't, and so some people do get confused about whether that takes place in area or out of area, and it matters not at all.
Yeah.
It's just anything that is purely to make a financial return is no longer permitted.
Okay, Councillor Steve Pitt.
Yeah, Chris, the original strategy behind the national property portfolio was not that those properties would be retained for years and years and years, but they would be flipped every 5, 6, 7 years or so for replacement properties. Am I right in saying that we can no longer use that money from any disposal of any of those sites to invest in more such properties, and therefore the principles on which the previous administration set up this national property portfolio scheme are now in tatters effectively? This is something we are going to have to, in order to avoid future cuts to services at the council, we will need to find new ways to generate income when it is the necessity to divest ourselves of these properties over the coming years.
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, I'm happy with these recommendations. Colleagues, are you happy with these and to pass them on to full council? Okay, Chris, your second one.
Okay, the second, or my second item at least, again, this is the Treasury Management Policy Statement. And again, this is for consideration by full council on the 16th of March as well. Now, this deals with the council's borrowing and investing for short-term funds. So completely different, obviously, from the report that we've just spoken about, which is generally around long-term investments. This relates purely to any temporary surplus cash flows or cash requirements that the council requires just to manage its day-to-day activities. It follows the government guidance and best practice, actually, of the priority, particularly for any investments around security first. So that's the first priority, is to invest sums where it's very, very secure. Second priority is liquidity, i.e. the funds are available as and when required in order to meet your day-to-day expenditure needs. And thirdly, it's yield. So there's a clear prioritization with the return on any investment being the third priority in that overall list. The strategy is designed that way, and it's been designed that way for, well, since I can remember. And the recommendations within the report are generally similar to previous years. The one main change really is to create what's described as a separate loans pool for the housing revenue account, only for that borrowing that took place during the current financial year, where the council or councils were allowed to borrow at very, very good preferential rates, so long as it was for social housing. So it only seems appropriate that we have a ring-fenced borrowing pool for the housing revenue account, so that the housing revenue account benefits from those lower rates, and those lower rates are not shared across the housing revenue account and the rest of the council, i.e. the general fund. So that's the main change to the recommendations. All of the other recommendations are centred around that proper risk management approach of maintaining proper security over any funds that are invested. That's all from me, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with that and happy to pass this on to full council? Thank you very much indeed. And I think the last item is the minutes of the previous meeting, item 3 on the agenda. Colleagues, are you happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, colleagues, for your time today. That is the end of our agenda. Anna, have we done everything you need us to do?
Yes, I'll turn the live stream off now if you like, and
yeah, thank you very much.
You'll still be audible for a couple of minutes.
Okay. So, folks, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's it. I will bid you. We can all disappear now. Bye bye. Goodbye.